What are you top in 0.1% of in the world? Story 1. My claim to fame. I am the only person on earth that has or has ever had my given and surname. While I do have a middle name, it is unnecessary. How do I know? My dad's last name was common and of Polish origins. His parents emigrated to America from Poland. My dad was born about 10 years later in 1910. Both his parents died, 2 days apart, due to the 1918 pandemic. Dad was taken in by several foster homes, and when he turned 14 he applied for a work permit. According to the county clerk, Dad did not exist. But my dad knew his birth date, he knew the doctor who delivered him, and the clerk put 2 and 2 together and found a birth record with a scribbled name. The county clerk then wrote what he believed the scribble said, and that became his surname, but it was unlike any other name. So, all of his children were born with the made-up surname. At my age, mid-70s, I know every one of the 93 people who now share that made-up surname, and not a one of them has the same given name as me. Story 2. My uncle has a really odd talent. I'm 21 and can think of nearly 100 personal losses, but my uncle is 65 now, and not only can he list everyone he has ever lost, but how they died, how old they were, and what he appreciated about them most. My dad was number 601, and Grandma, their mother, was #613 3 months apart. The list was at 675 the last time I talked to him. He doesn't even get emotional about it or anything. Aside from our immediate family, it's almost like thinking of the list brings him joy because he's able to think of the positives people brought to his life before he lost them, and he just appreciates the time he had with them. I try to embrace that approach. Story 3. I was rescued from a sex trafficking situation by someone in that world, an extreme rarity in itself. Was very lucky to have the police and other agencies believe my story. They don't usually have much sympathy for someone sitting in front of them that's obviously on drugs and been doing sex work. Was saved 3 times by the police when the trafficker/his people came after me. Got clean, with only a couple of minor relapses, by myself while working on accepting what happened to me and that it was my perfect boyfriend who did it to me. Accepting that my life was completely ruined, that I lost everything, that my dignity and confidence is no more, that my family preferred to victim blame and cut me off. That I was now destitute and wholly dependent on the government for my survival. It was harder than any beating or rape or other degrading thing I went through. Now I'm just a severely traumatized ex-junkie with a lifetime's worth of self-doubt, trust issues, anxiety and depression that no amount of therapy can fix. But I survived. Never looked back. And unless someone I love waves the drug I was mostly hooked on in front of my face, that part is over too. I know my story isn't all that special, but it's not something I often talk about, and from what I know, successfully getting out and getting clean is very rare, and I wanted to feel good about it. Story 4. I suffer from a combination of illnesses that make me severely disabled in a certain way. I have been invited to several studies and doctors from several European countries. I have tested medication that's not on the market for over 10 years. My disability doesn't have a name yet, but will probably get named after one of my doctors who has known me for over half my life. It started as a mental illness with psychosomatic seizures. During each seizure, a part of my brain tissue disconnects and then sometimes dies. Sorry for the terrible explanation. I am neither a doctor nor a native speaker. Long story short, my doctors have found out about like 12 other people having a similar combination of symptoms, yet it was not properly documented or researched before. That kinda makes me a 0.1% of the population, sadly not on top. Story 5. I can type 180 WPM at 99% accuracy, 170 at 100% accuracy. At least I used to when I actually was the ultimate computer nerd. I'm sure I could still hit 155 to 160 even now though. Haven't seen anyone who could type faster even online. I have an old SFB post from hitting like 175 at 99%. On typing tests, think I was ranked number 1 out of 1.2 mil. I can't remember. If people end up reading this, I'll end up linking it for proof, lol. Story 6. CW medical/car accident story. I was in a car accident where I hydroplaned off the road and hit a power pole, which broke the power pole clean off, and then spun around and hit an oak tree. The accident caused me brain damage to the point of internal hemorrhaging from all the thrashing around, and a ruptured spleen from my stomach hitting the steering wheel. The brain damage was medically enough to have killed me, because blood kills brain cells when it contacts them. That's why the blood/brain barrier exists. Blood in the brain also increases cranial pressure, which causes further brain damage, but guess what? I lost 1/3 of my blood through my ruptured spleen, which meant that my blood pressure and cranial pressure remained lower than they would have if I had not ruptured my spleen. It also meant that there was less blood to bleed onto my brain in general. Even so, I was in a coma for a week. However, once I woke from my coma, my brain recovered from the brain damage further and faster than expected, and I ended up not only being able to finish high school, I was 17, but eventually being able to finish a master's program. Not bad for having been in a coma that was a 3, the lowest score, on the Glasgow coma scale, which I learned later meant that I had an 87% chance of never waking up again. Plus it turned out that I had an extra spleen, and only one was damaged, so I still have one. All that stuff combined has to put me in the top 0.1% of something, right? Luck? Survivalism? Biological stubbornness? Story 7. IG not 0.1% but still pretty rare. I have acute hypothyroidism, which means I was born without a thyroid. In short, I'm lacking throat organ, which means brain make too much chemical and lack of throat organ makes not make chemical into better chemical. In long, my brain makes a chemical meant to power my thyroid, which in turn makes a chemical that essentially acts as motor oil and hydraulic fluid to keep my organs moving and functioning properly, but because I don't have that organ, I'm getting too much of that original brain chemical, causing issues like my organs not working properly and my body starts to slowly deteriorate until I'm not much more than basically Gollum from Lord of the Rings. But I take a medicine that basically acts as a thyroid and makes the chemical change. Story 8. I've experienced life as every type of sibling minus being a twin. I was born and lived as an only child until I was 2. Then my little brother was born and I became the eldest child. I turned 18 and I found out I had a hidden half-sister who was a decade older than me, so I became a middle child. And then my brother died and I became the youngest child. After that, my mom adopted his friend and I became a middle child again. Of course, I will always feel like the eldest child. It's how I was raised initially, but I don't think more than 0.1% of the population has experienced this. So I must be in the top.